To capture the cargo bay of the human transport vessel Meridian echoed with the sound of reinforced steel being tested to its limits. Captain Marcus Reed stood behind the observation window, watching the containment team struggle with their latest acquisition. The alien prisoner thrashed against her restraints with a fury that made the seasoned crew members step back in alarm. She was unlike anything they had encountered before. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her body was a perfect blend of humanoid, intelligence, and predatory grace. Her skin was covered in fine, silver-blue scales that caught the harsh industrial lighting, and her eyes burned with an amber fire that seemed to pierce through anyone who dared meet her gaze. Sharp canine teeth gleamed when she snarled, and her hands ended in retractable claws that could easily tear through flesh. Species designation Valeth, Dr. Sarah Chun reported, consulting her tablet while maintaining a careful distance from the containment field. Highly aggressive, possibly sentient, but we haven't been able to establish meaningful communication. She was found in the wreckage of what appeared to be a scout vessel near the Kepler station. Reed nodded grimly. The Kepler station massacre had left 300 human colonists dead, and this creature had been found at the center of it all. Whether she was responsible or merely a survivor remained to be determined, but her violent capture had already cost them 2 security officers and a medical technician. "Have you attempted standard first contact protocols?" Reed asked, his voice steady despite the chaos below. "We tried, sir." She responds to our presence with immediate aggression. Dr. Patel was nearly eviscerated when he attempted to approach with a translation device. We've had to rely on tranquilizers to keep her manageable. As if summoned by their conversation, the alien's head snapped toward the observation window. Those burning amber eyes locked onto Reed's, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. There was intelligence there, fierce and calculating, but also something else he couldn't quite identify. Pain, perhaps, or desperation. "I want to try a different approach," Reed said, surprising his officers. "Open the bay doors." "I'm going down there." "Sir, that's extremely inadvisable," Commander Lisa Torres interjected. "The subject has already demonstrated lethal capabilities. We should maintain current containment protocols until we can establish safe communication methods." Reed was already moving toward the exit. "Sometimes the direct approach is the only one that works, Commander. Have medicals standing by, but keep them at a distance. And Torres, if this goes badly, don't send in a rescue team. Just activate the emergency containment fields." The cargo bay fell silent as Reed entered, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The alien, who had been dubbed Kestra by the crew, based on markings found on her damaged vessel, immediately focused all her attention on him. Her lips pulled back in a snarl, revealing those predatory teeth, and a low growl rumbled from her throat. "Easy," Reed said, his voice calm but carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "I'm not here to hurt you." Kestra's response was swift and vicious. She lunged forward, only to be stopped by the containment field's energy barrier. Sparks flew as her claws scraped against the invisible wall, and she let out a sound that was part roar, part scream of frustration. Dr. Chun, who had been monitoring from a safe distance, made the mistake of approaching with a medical scanner. "Captain, I need to get readings on her vital signs for the report." Kestra's attention snapped to the doctor. With reflexes that seemed impossible, she somehow managed to partially phase through the containment field, her arm extending just far enough to grab Chun's wrist. The doctor's scream filled the bay as razor-sharp teeth sank into her forearm, tearing through the protective fabric of her uniform and into flesh beneath. "Get her back," Torres shouted over the comm system, but Reed was already moving. Instead of using force or weapons, Reed approached the struggling pair with deliberate calm. He placed his hand on Kestra's shoulder, and she immediately released. Chun to spin toward him, her jaws snapping mere inches from his face. The contained fury in her eyes was matched only by the steady resolve in his. "That's enough," Reed said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that somehow penetrated her rage. "You've made your point. Now let's see if we can find a better way to communicate." Kestra's response was immediate and primal. She drew herself up to her full height, her scales shifting to a darker, more threatening hue, and released a hiss that seemed to vibrate through the metal decking. It was a sound of pure challenge, a declaration of war from an apex predator who refused to be caged. Reed didn't flinch. He held her gaze, his own expression unchanging, and after several tense seconds, something shifted in the alien's posture. The hiss faded to a low growl, then to silence. She studied him with those amber eyes, her head tilting slightly as if seeing him for the first time. "Computer, analyze vocal patterns and body language," Reed commanded. "Cross-reference with known communication methods from similar species." The AI's response was immediate. Vocal patterns suggest territorial display behavior. Physical posturing indicates challenge response to perceived authority figures. Recommendation: establish dominance hierarchy through consistent behavioral patterns. Over the following days, Reed implemented an unconventional approach to managing their dangerous prisoner. Instead of treating Kestra as a simple captive, he began to establish a routine that acknowledged her intelligence while maintaining necessary security protocols. He personally oversaw her feeding times, ensuring she received proper nutrition suited to her physiology. He arranged for her containment cell to be modified with environmental controls that better matched the atmospheric conditions of her apparent home world. Most importantly, he spent time in her presence without showing fear or aggression. He would sit just outside her containment field, working on reports or reading, occasionally speaking to her in calm, measured tones. At first, she would pace restlessly, her claws clicking against the deck plating. But gradually, she began to settle, watching him with those intelligent eyes. The breakthrough came during their fifth encounter. Reed had been explaining the ship's daily routine to her, more for his own benefit than hers, when she suddenly moved to the far corner of her cell and began tracing patterns in the dust with her claw. Complex geometric shapes that definitely weren't random. "She's trying to communicate," Dr. Chun observed, her injured arm still in a biocast. "Those patterns, they're mathematical, universal concepts." Reed stood and approached the containment field. "Kestra," he said, using the name they had given her. "Are you trying to tell us something?" Her response was to create more patterns, more elaborate designs that seemed to tell a story. Images of stars, of ships, of destruction on a massive scale. And in the center of it all, a symbol that appeared repeatedly. A spiral pattern that seemed to writhe and pulse even when drawn in simple lines. "My God," Torres whispered. "She's not a raider. She's trying to warn us about something." The realization changed everything. Reed made a decision that would be questioned by his superiors for months to come. He ordered Kestra moved from the cargo bay to a specially prepared set of quarters adjacent to his own command suite. The move was justified as a security measure, allowing for constant monitoring and immediate response to any aggressive behavior. Asterisk. But the truth was more complex. Reed had begun to recognize that Kestra wasn't just intelligent, she was desperate. Her attacks on the crew weren't random violence, but the actions of someone trying to communicate vital information through the only means available to her. The patterns she drew, the way she reacted to certain star charts, the obvious distress when she looked at images of human colonies, it all pointed to something larger. The new quarters were Spartan, but functional, with a sleeping area, basic, furniture, and a small workstation where she could continue her pattern drawing. More importantly, they included a connecting door to Reed's own quarters, secured but not impenetrable. It was a gesture of trust that didn't go unnoticed. Kestra's behavior changed dramatically in her new environment. The constant aggression faded, replaced by a watchful alertness that suggested she was evaluating rather than attacking. She began to respond to Reed's presence with what could almost be called curiosity, watching him work, listening to his reports, even attempting to mimic some of his gestures. "Captain," Torres said during one of their daily briefings, "the crew is getting nervous. Having that ... creature so close to command operations is making everyone jumpy." Reed understood their concerns, but he also understood something else. "She's not a creature, Commander. She's a person. A very dangerous person, perhaps, but still a person. And I think she's trying to save us from something we can't even imagine." The proof came sooner than anyone expected. During what should have been a routine shift change, Kestra began exhibiting extreme agitation. She paced frantically in her quarters, her scales shifting through different colors, and she repeatedly pointed toward the outer hull of the ship. Her distress was so obvious that Reed activated the internal sensors to monitor her behavior. "She's trying to tell us something," he realized. "Computer, scan for any unusual readings in the direction she's indicating." The results were chilling. Long-range sensors detected a massive object approaching from the outer system, something that barely registered on their instruments, but cast a shadow that seemed to devour light itself. Whatever it was heading directly for their position. "All hands to battle stations," Reed commanded. "Unknown contact approaching. Prepare for potential hostile engagement." But as the bridge crew scrambled to respond, Reed found himself looking toward Kestra's quarters. Her agitation had reached a fever pitch, and she was now creating new patterns on every available surface. These weren't the careful geometric designs of before, but urgent, desperate warnings. The ship's AI finally managed to translate one of her more recent drawings. "Void swarm, devourers, run." Reed's blood ran cold. The Kepler Station massacre hadn't been the work of raiders or pirates. It had been something far worse, something that consumed entire worlds and left nothing but empty space behind. And Kestra hadn't been the perpetrator. She had been trying to escape, trying to warn others. Torres set course for the nearest inhabited system. Maximum speed. "Sir, we haven't even identified the threat yet." "That's in order, Commander." "And prepare to release the containment fields on our guest. I think we're going to need her help." As the Meridian changed course, racing away from the approaching darkness, Reed made his way to Kestra's quarters. She was waiting for him, her amber eyes reflecting both relief and grim determination. When he opened the connecting door between their quarters, she didn't attack or flee. Instead, she moved to his workstation and began creating new patterns. Complex diagrams that looked suspiciously like battle plans. "So," Reed said, settling into his chair beside her, "you're not our prisoner anymore, are you? You're our first line of defense against something that makes your species look like gentle scholars." Kestra's response was a sound he had never heard from her before, something that might have been laughter, if laughter could carry the weight of impending doom. She continued working on her diagrams, and Red found himself studying them with the attention of a student learning from a master. The first part of their journey together was ending, but he suspected the real adventure was just beginning. Asterisk from prisoner to protector, the transformation of Kestra from prisoner to ally happened. Gradually, then all at once. Over the following weeks, Reed established a routine that treated her as what she truly was, a warrior diplomat of a species fighting for survival against an enemy that defied human understanding. Each morning, Reed would find her in the small workspace he had arranged, creating new diagrams and star charts. Her drawings had evolved from simple warnings to complex tactical analyses, showing the movement patterns of the void swarm. their feeding habits, and most importantly, their weaknesses. She had become the Meridian's most valuable intelligence asset, even though they still couldn't communicate verbally. Dr. John, her arm finally healed from their initial encounter, had become fascinated by Kestra's methods of communication. Captain, I've been analyzing her pattern languages. She's not just drawing pictures, she's creating a sophisticated mathematical model of four-dimensional spacetime. Her species must have a completely different way of perceiving reality. Reed nodded, watching Kestra work. She had developed a habit of acknowledging his presence with a slight nod when he entered the workspace, a gesture that felt more like recognition between equals than the wary vigilance of a captive. Have you made any progress on vocal communication? Some. Her species has a much broader vocal range than humans, and they seem to use harmonic frequencies to convey emotional context. I think she's been trying to teach us her language, but we haven't been listening at the right frequencies. The breakthrough came during what should have been a routine navigation update. Reed was reviewing their course when Kestra suddenly placed her hand on his arm, her claws carefully retracted. She pointed to the star chart displaying their current position, and to one of her own drawings. Her meaning was clear. They were heading into danger. Computer, scan for anomalous readings in grid 77 Alpha, Reed commanded. The response was immediate and terrifying. Multiple contacts detected. Classification unknown. Estimated arrival time, 4 hours. Reed looked at Kestra, who was already moving toward the weapons locker he had reluctantly installed in their shared workspace. She understood combat in ways that human military doctrine couldn't even imagine. Her drawings had shown him fighting techniques that utilized her species' natural advantages: speed, agility, and an almost supernatural ability to predict enemy movements. All hands to battle stations, Reed announced over the ship's communication system. We have multiple hostile contacts approaching. This is not a drill. Commander Torres arrived on the bridge within minutes, her expression grim. Captain, long range. Sensors are showing at least 30 contacts. They're not using any propulsion system we recognize, but they're closing fast. Reed studied the tactical display, comparing it to Kestra's warnings. They're not ships, Commander. They're something else entirely. Biological entities that feed on energy and matter. And they're hunting us. The first wave of the Void Swarm arrived exactly as Kestra had predicted. They weren't mechanical constructs, but living creatures the size of small moons, their bodies pulsing with an inner darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. Tentacles like writhing shadows reached out from their forms, probing the Meridian's shields with an intelligence that was both alien and terrifying. Shields down to 60%, Torres reported. They're not just attacking us, they're trying to digest our energy signature. Reed's mind raced through the tactical options Kestra had shown him. Rotate shield frequencies. Don't let them adapt to our defensive patterns. And prepare for close quarters combat. Sir, we don't have the weaponry to fight those things. No, but we have something better. We have someone who knows how to fight them. Reed activated the internal communication system. Kestra, we need you on the bridge. Now. She arrived within seconds, moving with the fluid grace of a predator entering her natural element. The bridge crew tensed as she approached, but Reed held up a hand for calm. Kestra moved to the tactical station, her amber eyes scanning the displays with an intensity that made the air itself seem to vibrate. What happened next would be remembered in human military history as the first successful interspecies combat. Coordination. Kestra began creating rapid tactical adjustments, her claws dancing across the control surfaces as she modified their shield configurations, weapon targeting, and even their flight patterns. She was fighting the Void Swarm with the accumulated knowledge of her entire species. She's rewriting our combat protocols in real time, the tactical officer reported in amazement. "Our hit ratio just increased by 300%. But the real test came when the Void Swarm adapted to their new tactics. One of the creatures broke through their defensive perimeter, its shadow tentacles wrapping around the Meridians. Hull, the ship shuddered as the creature began to drain their power systems. Kestra's response was immediate and shocking. She moved to the emergency airlock, her intent clear. She was going outside to fight the creature directly. Asterisk. "Kestra, no!" Reed shouted, but she was already cycling through the airlock sequence. What followed was a battle that defied human understanding. In the vacuum of space, protected only by an emergency environment suit, Kestra fought the void. Swarm creature with weapons that seemed to be extensions of her own body. Energy blades that cut through shadow flesh. Projectile weapons that fired concentrated bursts of her own life force. And most incredibly, her ability to move through space as if it were her natural element. The creature that had been draining. Their ship writhed in apparent agony as Kestra's attacks found their mark. But she wasn't just fighting, she was communicating. Her movements followed patterns that Reed recognized from her diagrams. And somehow, impossibly, the creature began to respond. "Captain," Dr. Chon said, her voice filled with wonder. "She's not just fighting it, she's talking to it." The battle ended not with destruction, but with understanding. The Void Swarm creature released its hold on the Meridian and began to move. Away, its movements now following patterns that seemed almost apologetic. The other creatures in the swarm began to retreat as well, their aggression replaced by something that looked like recognition. When Kestra returned to the bridge, she was exhausted but triumphant. She moved to the communication station and began working with Dr. Chun to establish the first true linguistic exchange between their species. "She's explaining what just happened," Chun translated as Kestra's harmonic vocalizations filled the bridge. "The Void Swarm aren't invaders, they're refugees. They've been fleeing something even worse, something that destroyed their original home dimensions. They attack other species, not out of malice, but because they're starving and desperate." Reed felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. And Kestra's people? They've been trying to find a solution, a way to coexist, to help both species survive. But they needed allies, needed someone who could bridge the gap between biological and technological civilizations. The implications were staggering. Humanity had stumbled into a conflict that spanned dimensions, involving species and entities that existed beyond their current understanding. And Kestra, the fierce warrior they had captured and imprisoned, had been trying to recruit them as allies from the very beginning. "She wants to know if humanity is ready to join the alliance," Chun continued, "to help find a solution that doesn't require the extinction of either species." Reed looked around the bridge at his crew, saw the same mixture of fear and determination in their faces that he felt in his own heart. Humanity had always been at its best when facing the impossible, when choosing to stand with the underdog against overwhelming odds. "Tell her yes," he said simply. "Tell her that humanity stands, ready to help." Kestra's response was immediate and profound. She moved to Reed and placed her hand on his shoulder, her amber eyes meeting his with an intensity that seemed to burn through him. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that needed no translation. "Captain," Sean said, tears streaming down her face. She's saying, "Welcome to the war, brother." The days that followed transformed the Meridian from a simple transport vessel into the first embassy between humanity and the Valeth. Kestra worked tirelessly to establish communication protocols, to share her people's knowledge of the Void Swarm, and to prepare humanity for the challenges ahead. She had claimed not just quarters aboard the ship, but a place in human history, as the first alien ambassador to serve alongside human forces. Her initial aggression had been the desperate actions of a warrior trying to protect her people and warn potential allies. Her bite had been a test of human resolve, her hiss a challenge to see if they were worthy of the alliance she offered. Reed often found himself working late into the ship's night cycle, planning strategies with Kestra for the larger war to come. She had become more than an ally. She had become a friend, a bridge between species that had once seemed incompatible. "You know," Reed said during one of their planning sessions, "when you first bit Dr. Chun, I thought you were just another predator we needed to contain." Kestra's response was one of the harmonic sounds that Chun had identified as laughter. She gestured to the tactical displays showing the positions of both human and Valith forces, now coordinated in their search for a solution to the Void Swarm crisis. She says, Chun translated from her position at the communication station, that she knew from the moment she saw you that humans were the allies her people had been searching for. Your species' ability to see potential allies in apparent enemies is exactly what this alliance needs. Reed nodded, looking out at the stars where human and Valith ships now traveled together, searching for a way to save multiple species from extinction. Sometimes the most important alliances begin with a bite and a hiss. Kestra's amber eyes gleamed with what could only be called satisfaction. She had come aboard the Meridian as a prisoner, had fought her way to understanding, and had ultimately claimed not just quarters, but a permanent place in humanity's future among the stars. A war was far from over, but humanity was no longer fighting alone. They had found their first true alien ally, and she had found them through the most unlikely of circumstances. A desperate attack that had been mistaken for aggression. When? It was actually the beginning of the greatest alliance in human history. The feral ambassador had claimed her place among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk.